Space is perhaps the most unforgiving environment in the cosmos. There's no air, so not only is there nothing to breathe, there's no medium to carry away heat. Assuming the life support systems in your spacesuit stopped working, being exposed to sunlight in space can lead to a searing death in the heat, while taking refuge in the shade can lead to a freezing death in the darkness. If your spacecraft or your spacesuit ruptures, and your pressurized mini-atmosphere leaks away into space, you will experience an intense depressurization. Before you pass out and die, you might feel the liquid moisture on your tongue and eyeballs boiling away into gas. Microgravity is another ever-present threat when moving through space. Numerous studies have analyzed the effects of microgravity on astronauts, and the most well-known symptoms are muscle atrophy and a rapid reduction in bone density. Both of these symptoms, which can progress to the point of causing serious health concerns, are a result of being weightless and having no heavy forces involved in your day-to-day activities. Here on Earth, we are always exposed to Earth's gravity, so even when you're doing something easy, like just walking around or sitting upright, your muscles are making small flexes and contractions almost constantly, so that you can maintain your posture, control your inertia, keep your balance, and respond to environmental forces, like uneven terrain and the wind. And during all of this, your bones are holding up the wet baggage that is your body, experiencing constant stresses as you stand, walk, run, jump, and push or pull objects in your environment. In space, your body is weightless. All of the things that you interact with are weightless, so there's a huge reduction in the regular microstresses that keep your bones and your muscles strong. Another effect of microgravity is that the fluid in your body gets redistributed. Normally, in an Earth-based environment, gravity tries to pool the blood in your legs, which is why our veins have evolved a series of valves to prevent backflow, which helps your heart circulate blood against the force of gravity and pump it back out of your legs. In space, when there is no gravity, your internal fluids will diffuse and spread out equally across the body. So, compared to a human on Earth, an astronaut in space will have more fluid retention in their head and relatively less in their legs. This can lead to higher pressure in the skull, swollen optic nerves, and flattened eyeballs, as even the fluid in the eyeballs takes on a more even, spherical shape, as opposed to the more elongated oval or egg-like shape that your eyeballs actually have here on Earth. And this, of course, can lead to vision problems, as the lens and focal point are pushed out of alignment. A new study conducted by scientists at NASA was looking at the alterations of blood flow and vascular structure when on Earth compared to when in space. On Earth, they looked at 11 patients, using ultrasound to measure the blood flow through their jugular vein while seated, while lying down, and while in a tilted position. When the astronauts launched and began operating in the microgravity of space, they repeated the ultrasound measurements at all 3 orientations. The results were eye-opening and rather frightening because of their implications for human health in space. For example, in 5 of the 11 astronauts, so in almost half of them, the blood in their jugular vein seemed to stall. Karina Marshall-Goebel is a senior scientist at NASA and the author of the study in question. She said, quote, "Sometimes it was sloshing back and forth a bit, but there was no net forward movement," unquote. Now, usually, stalled blood flow is rare, occurring mostly in the legs, and even then, only in certain circumstances, like when you've been sitting still for hours on a plane. The danger with stagnant blood flow is that it can lead to clumping of blood cells and plasma debris, and this can lead to clots. In most circumstances, a blood clot will dissolve on its own, or when the patient is given an anticoagulant. But sometimes clots can persist and block veins. These clots can be dislodged from one place, washed down the vasculature to another place, where they can then block smaller blood vessels or even rupture them. Pressure can build up behind a clot, leading to structural collapse of the delicate vasculature tissue. And depending on where the rupture or the embolism happens, the effects can be catastrophic. A pulmonary embolism, or a clot that ruptures a blood vessel in the lungs, can cause fluid buildup in the lung, leading to pneumonia. An embolism in the brain can happen suddenly, with little to no warning, and the outcome is often death. In 2 of the astronauts in the study, they even saw their jugular blood flow change direction, which Mrs. Marshall-Goebel said was extremely abnormal. She explained that blood flow changes direction if there's a clot somewhere and the blood flow is trying to find a detour. She said, quote, "It's almost like a detour when you're in your car and you sometimes have to go down the wrong street to get where you need to go," unquote. She also noted how the body seems to have made some emergency adaptations, where the organs in the torso had shifted upwards, and even blocked off certain veins. It's almost as if the body is reorganizing itself in a kind of immediate adaptive strategy for the microgravity environment. But in any case, identifying blood clots in space is serious business, especially when the clot is in or near the jugular vein, which means that it's in or near the head, neck, and upper chest. There's a lot of sensitive anatomy here, and a blood clot could have fatal repercussions. Worse, clots can form in a matter of days, and some astronauts are in space for months or even more than a year. Fortunately, none of the astronauts faced any serious health consequences, and when they returned to Earth, their blood flow returned to normal, and the signs of clotting disappeared. Although there weren't any serious health outcomes in the astronauts during the study period, this doesn't rule out the possibility entirely. Other space researchers have taken immense interest in these findings, and they argue that this should be a subject for much more research before we engage in long-term space travel. For example, one of the initial complications that's been discussed involves the use of birth control. The pill can increase the chances of developing clots, so using the pill in space would put the astronaut at even higher risk of a blood clot. With respect to the study and the discovery of these clots, Miss Marshall-Goebel said, quote, "I think it was probably scary for everybody, but I think the fact that we found this now is really, really good news, because it's something that, if you know this is a risk factor for spaceflight, it's something that you can monitor and prevent," unquote. On this note, NASA is now developing a program for regular ultrasound monitoring for space-based astronauts to keep an eye on any emergency clots. There will also be the appropriate medical equipment, like anticoagulants, to deal with clots right there in the space station, or the spaceship, or the space colony, as opposed to waiting hours, days, or weeks for a chance to return to Earth to be treated by an Earth-based doctor. This discovery is another small step in the long process of transitioning humanity into an interplanetary, and perhaps even one day, an interstellar civilization. Everything that helps us live safely in space, or on other planets, will ultimately help us reach out into the cosmos and spread our descendants throughout the stars.